Right, and the exciting part for me, the gavel. And good afternoon, members of the MAG Management Committee. This meeting is now called to order. For those around the table, please turn on your microphone when speaking. For those participating via Zoom, we ask that you state your name when making a comment or asking a question. The MAG public comment process allows members of the public to comment items on today's agenda or on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction. If you would like to comment on today's meeting, please fill out a request to speak card located on the information table in the hallway and give it to MAG staff. If you parked in the garage, parking validators are available in the information table in the hallway. And if you purchase a transit ticket to come to the meeting, please see staff for a ticket as well. Hearing assisted devices are available from MAG staff. And we'll now begin the meeting with a roll call of all members.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Management Committee. I will go down the list of members alphabetically and indicate if you are present. Amy Arguelles for Patrick Banger.
Present.
Thank you. Jeffrey Barton.
Present.
Thank you. Jean Blackman. Christopher Brady.
Here.
Thank you. Andrew Ching. Dan Cotterman.
Here.
Thank you. Kathleen Curley. Philip Dorchester. Amber Wakeman for Crystal Dykes.
Present.
Thank you. Carrie Dyrick.
Present.
Thank you. Stephen Erno.
Here.
Thank you. Jeff Graves for Lisa Garcia.
Here.
Thank you. Mark Sanders for Director Halakowski. Ben Bitter for Rick Horst. Julie Cairns.
Here.
Thank you. Joe Kymack. John Cross.
Here.
Thank you. Jeff Kulaga. Thank you. Leo Liu. Reyes Medrano. Jessica Mefford Miller.
Present.
Thank you. Jennifer Jack for Brian Myers. Grady Miller.
Here.
Thank you. Gary Neese.
Here.
Thank you. Shirlene Panilla.
Here.
Thank you. Kevin Phelps.
Present.
Thank you. Matt Busby for Bryant Powell.
Present.
Thank you. Joy Rich.
Here.
Thank you. Dale Webush for Jim Thompson.
Present.
Thank you. Chair Jeff Tyne.
Present.
Thank you. Kathy Valenzuela. Thank you. Matthew Williams. Mike Jemp for Bob Wingenroth.
Present.
Thank you. Joshua Wright.
Here.
Thank you. Is there anyone that I missed? Mr. Chair, we have quorum.
Great, thank you very much. And I'll ask all of us to join with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Our next item is call to the audience. This is an opportunity for the public to comment on MAG's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda or that are on the agenda for discussion and not for action. 15 minutes will be provided for the call to the audience agenda item unless the committee requests an exception to this limit. At this point, I've received no request to speak cards for this agenda item. MAG also provides the opportunity for members of the public to submit written comments via the MAG website 1 hour prior to the meeting. And staff, do we have any written comments for this item?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've not received any written comments for this item or any other item on the agenda today.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. We'll then move to our next item, a report from MAG Executive Director Eric Anderson. This item is, of course, for.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Management Committee. A few items of hopefully of interest to you today. If we can go to the next slide. So we did recently lose a regional leader, Keno Hawker, from Mayor Mesa. Keno was intimately involved in the preparation of the plan for Proposition 400. He chaired the Regional Council Transportation Subcommittee, which was actually the precursor committee to the Transportation Policy Committee. So Keno was a great regional leader. He believed in regional approaches to problems such as transportation. So we'll certainly miss him. Go to the next slide. In October, the ITS, Intelligent Transportation Systems, that's ITS, Arizona Annual Conference was held. And MAG took 3 of the top awards there, really recognizing our emerging technology program that really has produced some interesting pilot project results. So you go to the next slide. Some of our MAG staff there enjoying the recognition. So go to the next slide. Also, very pleased to report that our fiscal year 2021 annual CAFR, Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, received the GFOA, which is the Government Financial Officers Association Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. It's the 24th year in a row MAG has been recognized with that achievement. Go to the next slide. Last month, we enjoyed a ribbon cutting for the El Mirage Northern Parkway Overpass project. A number of West Valley mayors participated in that event, including Mayor Carlott from Peoria, Mayor Hermosillo, El Mirage, Mayor Wires from Glendale, and Supervisor Clint Hickman too. Great accomplishment. The Northern Parkway project is the largest project we have funded out of our Arturo Lifecycle program, with over $200 million regional funds being allocated to this project. So go to the next slide. Very proud that John Bullen was named just this week as one of the Capital Times under 40 honorees. So John has done a great job in helping us put the plan together, programming activities, and one thing or another. So very proud to announce this achievement by John. Go to the next slide. A couple other items. So at the Arizona State Fair, we did participate in the public safety days. And a number of people, over hundreds of people, participate in our transportation priority survey that we asked. We also provide information on Secure Your Load and shared information on our Don't Trash Arizona program also. Next slide. So if you recall, back in September, Anna Bob Bagley gave a fairly comprehensive presentation on housing. This has now been all incorporated in a new Housing Data Explorer website. So the information that he presented at that meeting is now being updated on a regular basis and available to both you, your staff, as well as members of the public. Next slide. And lastly, we just rolled out a redesign of our homepage. One of our major objectives was to make this more accessible. And so we tuned it up, and congratulations to our communications staff. Libby Hanks and Tanya Mortensen did a great job in engineering the redesign of our website. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate that. And please contact Eric after the meeting if you have any questions. Next item we have is the approval of the consent agenda. Items 5A through 5G are on the consent agenda. At this point, does any member of the committee have questions or request a presentation for any of these items? Yes, Mr. Phelps.
Mr. Chair, I don't need a presentation, just a question of staff on 5D, as in 5 Delta.
D as in David?
Delta, yeah.
Yep, got it. Any other questions or comments? Okay, well, prior to the approval of the consent agenda, do we have any members of the public who wish to comment on consent? I've received no request to speak cards for this item.
Mr. Chair, we've not received any written comments for this item either.
Great, thank you very much, Andrew. Okay, with that, then is there a motion to approve consent items? We'll do 5A through 5G with the exception of 5D. The motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Erna.
Second.
Second by Mr. Phelps. Can I have a voice vote for those in the room? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. And staff, can you take a roll call of the members participating virtually?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I'll go down the list of members participating virtually. Please unmute. Indicate how you vote. Jeffrey Barton.
Aye.
Thank you. Amber Wakeman.
Aye.
Thank you. Carrie Dyrick.
Aye.
Thank you. Jeff Graves.
Aye.
Thank you. John Cross.
Aye.
Thank you. Jennifer Jack.
Aye.
Thank you. Grady Miller.
Aye.
Thank you. Gary Neese.
Aye.
Thank you. Shirlene Panilla.
Aye.
Thank you. Matt Busby.
Aye.
Thank you. Joy Rich.
Aye.
Thank you. Is there anyone that I missed? Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
Great, thank you very much. Next, we'll move to agenda item 5D, proposed 2023 revision to the 2020 edition of the MAG standard specifications and details for public works construction. I'll pass it to Mr. Anderson.
We have Gordon Tyus too, who manages this program in the meeting too. So
Yeah,
Mr.
and
Phelps?
just a question that I had for this. I realize that standards aren't prescriptive. They're kind of, they help the jurisdiction to adopt standardization. My question was revolved around the updating the standards regarding the smart metering using, kind of predictive analytics. I've been kind of indicated that maybe that's not part of the standard. And so in looking at how we manage water, especially here in Arizona, where we're far more attuned to, the drought that we're going through, I guess I would like to just say that in the future, if indeed that's the case, it seems to me to be, as we update these standards, we should be trying to adopt a standard around really smart metering that does leak detection, can do predictive analytics in terms of advanced understanding of watering needs versus kind of the existing models that are there. So I just want to make sure I'd heard that correct. That wasn't part of the new standard. And maybe just an encouragement that going forward that be included in part of the analysis when we update these standards.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that, Mr. Phelps.
thank you.
Any other questions or comments? And
Gordon, can you respond to that?
Yes, thank you, Chair Tyne and Mr. Phelps. The MAG specifications and details currently do not have any information about smart metering or leak detection. They're designed mainly for the public right of way, and oftentimes the meters and things like that are on private property. However, we do have an outside right of way working group who looks at issues that are kind of in that gray zone area. And they've been partnering with the Arizona State University. I'm trying to, it's the, I forget the name now. It's the cities that are looking for more environmentally friendly ways to kind of incorporate low impact development. So I think that this would be a group that would be good to look at this issue, and perhaps they can develop some cases or information for the main committee to review next year.
great, thank you. Very helpful. Any other thoughts? Appreciate it. Thank you. Very good conversation on that item and something that we'll look forward to. Appreciate the assistance on that. At this point, we'll look for a motion to approve item 5D. Do I have a motion? Motion by Mr. Phelps, a second. Second by Mr. Kulaga. All those in favor in here signify by a voice vote of saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And we'll go to a roll call vote for those virtual.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I'll go down the list of members participating virtually. Please unmute and indicate how you vote. Jeffrey Barton.
Aye.
Thank you. Amber Wakeman.
Aye.
Thank you. Carrie Dyrek.
Aye.
Thank you. Jeff Graves.
Aye.
Thank you. John Cross.
Aye.
Thank you. Jennifer Jack.
Aye.
Thank you. Grady Miller.
Aye.
Thank you. Gary Neese.
Aye.
Thank you. Shirlene Panilla.
Aye.
Thank you. Matt Busby.
Aye.
Thank you. Joy Rich.
Aye.
Thank you. Is there anyone that I missed? Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
Great, thank you very much. We'll move to agenda item 6, moving forward to Work Pathways Home. Here to present is MAG Regional Homeless Program Manager, and also to introduce our guest speaker, Mr. Podliger, good to see you. And this item is for information and discussion. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee for this opportunity to provide an update on the work to address homelessness. We've continued to work collaboratively with many of your staff, moving this work forward and finding new ways to tackle homelessness. Next slide, please. The purpose of this presentation is twofold: to really offer information on the work that is being undertaken to address homelessness and invite feedback or questions from you all. So with that, I am going to introduce Rob Podlager, the co-chair of the Continuum of Care Board and the Chief Community Development and Engagement Officer for Valley of the Sun United Way. Next slide.
Great, thank you. Thank you for having me here today. I want to provide a brief overview of some of the work that we're taking on with the Continuum of Care. Next slide, please. I wanted to share briefly an update on the funding that we applied for over the past few months in partnership with MAG. We submitted 2 funding applications. The first application is the annual Notice of Funding Opportunity, which we submitted in late September. Last year, we received $35.7 million locally to fund housing, supportive services, and our coordinated entry and HMIS systems. The second application was a brand new application that we received from HUD. The application focused on unsheltered population with severe service needs, and we applied for just under $28 million. And we anticipate to hear about the results of those applications in early 2023. Next slide, please. Next, I wanted to share an update on the point in time count. This will occur on the morning of January 24th of 2023. MAG staff is already working on this in partnership with local jurisdictions staff to coordinate the count at that time. We anticipate to have the results in mid to late April of next year. Next slide, please. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Katie to give an update and a walkthrough of the action plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Next slide, please. As you may have seen this before, and I'll continue to show this quarter over quarter, is this beautiful graph of the 14 action steps. As you've seen, we have now had one turn to green, which is really exciting for us as we continue to complete the community court toolkits being finalized in September. But I want to offer the next few slides that will walk through the details of the remaining steps of the plan. Next slide. I wanted to start by sharing some of the work that is being coordinated between the Continuum of Care and Pathways Home. We are in the midst of completing the HMIS evaluation and the coordinated entry evaluation, with completion being at the beginning of 2023. And then we've also finished mapping the different outreach teams that are coordinating across the Valley to better integrate and coordinate and work on policies so that outreach looks the same across our 9,000 square miles in the Valley. Next slide, please. As I just mentioned, we did finish the community court toolkit in September and now have posted both our interdepartmental teams that finished in July and our community court toolkits in September 2022. Both of these can be found on our website, and we are continuing to work through additional toolkits, including how to engage faith networks, affordable housing development, and the public education campaign. Next slide. We have also been working on a number of coordination activities in partnership with your staff, including a development of a funding filter, working with Threshold to host landlord engagement across different valleys and how to incorporate other landlords into the Threshold network, and then working with Home Matters on the public education campaign, which you'll hear about in just a second. We were just notified of another contribution to the public education campaign and excited to have a stronger regional presence with these additional resources. So just wanted to highlight that. And I'm sure, next slide, as many of you are anticipating to hear, is where are we at with the housing targets and the House America goal that you passed in June. So I wanted to quickly jump into that. We are currently 80% of the way through the challenge, and the challenge goes through the end of 2022. We've rehoused 76% of our goal and added 66% to the development pipeline. These numbers have only increased since September when I last pulled these numbers, and we'll continue to reach towards those goals. And I do anticipate that we will hit them before December. Next slide. I wanted to quickly touch on the housing target goals that we set back in December of 2021 when you all unanimously passed this plan. A little bit of background, we had an initial projection to reduce homelessness by 25%. And we're really targeting at continuing to address that 25%. And so those numbers have fluctuated because of a number of factors. So when we set those, it was 770 temporary units that we needed to create and 1,225 permanent units that we needed to create. However, as I mentioned, we have some factors to consider. We have unfortunately seen an increase in homelessness due to a variety of reasons. We've already increased units since 2020 when these numbers started being collected. And a lot of the increase, thanks to all of you, has been temporary funding due to COVID. And so that looking at the long term of this plan, this does go all the way through 2027. And as many of you know, we're going to have a funding cliff at some point. And so I wanted to talk through some of these. Next slide, please. So first, I'm going to talk through the temporary housing targets. To dive a little bit deeper, since our January 2020 PIT count, which is when we started counting these numbers, we've added an additional 1,154 units, obviously much higher than our 770 that we thought we needed. In addition, we have 556 units that have been committed to open before 2027 that have yet to have people move into those temporary units. So shelters that we've committed the funding, but we've yet to open those doors because of development or other additional factors. But of these 1,525 are right now funded through COVID response dollars. So that's either CARES or ARPA, which leaves kind of a gap to what happens when these ongoing funding, what happens to the ongoing funding of running operations for these shelters now that they're open. Next slide. On the permanent housing side, we see a similar result. So we've had 1,010 units through the end of September that were committed by jurisdictions that had individuals move into those units. So those are either rapid rehousing or emergency housing vouchers that we've had actually folks move into those apartments. We have an additional 1,579 units that have been committed, but households have yet to move into those units. And as similarly on the temporary side, we see the majority of these being funded through our COVID response, with 60% funded by CARES and ARPA and another 31% being funded by emergency housing vouchers. And so only 9% of that funding, it means that we potentially will see that ongoing after some of this COVID dollars are spent down. Next slide. So I want to ask some key questions that we've been thinking about and starting to think through this. How do we address our increasing homelessness numbers? What is the source of ongoing funding for program sustainability after our COVID funding expires? What is the source of operational funding, especially on the temporary shelter side? And then how do we address our increasing housing costs across the region? We know from Anna Bob's presentations that we've seen a 68% rent increase over the past 5 years. And so how do we continue to address that with our limited funding availability? And so after reviewing these additional numbers, the local jurisdiction committee, which is made up of many of your staff, are recommending staying at our 25% reduction until we can dive further into these details and really understand what is the cost associated with moving forward. We will be diving into these details over the coming months at a very granular level with the local jurisdiction committee and with many of you, and bringing forward recommendations in February on next steps. Next slide. And so with that, I will talk a little bit more about what else is next. Next slide. We have an update coming. So as we begin to accomplish steps, I mentioned a few of these are finishing at least a phase 1 in early 2023, not only on the housing targets, but other steps of this. We want to continue to review, revise, and add steps in partnership with your staff. And so we're looking to bring back an updated, like a phase 2, not a whole new plan, but in February to talk through with you all and really get feedback from you. If you're interested in engaging with these conversations before that, I really encourage you to talk with your staff and really talk with us about what that looks like for you all. Next slide. Before I close, I would be remiss not to say we have so many meetings, and you or your staff are more than welcome to come to any of them, specifically on the homelessness side. We have a complete list on our website, but here is a number of the ones upcoming over the next month. And with that, I will say next slide. And here's my contact information if you want to reach out to us, and I will turn it back to you, Chair, for any questions.
Great. Katie and Rob, thank you very much. Members, do we have any questions or comments? Great. Well, just want to mention congratulations on the progress that all of you have done. Just amazing work by all of you as the care committee, the staff, and all of your partners that you have. So congratulations and best of luck as you answer those next questions. Great. We'll move next to item number 7, marketing strategy for the Affordable Housing Public Education Campaign. This will be presented by MAG Communications Director Kelly Taft and guest speaker Catherine Alonso, CEO of Javelina. Thank you.
Okay, got turned off. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Management Committee. I just wanted to take a few minutes before I introduce Catherine. We are very pleased to provide an update on the progress to implement a regional homelessness public education campaign to implement that plan in accordance with the Pathways Home Action Plan. The goal of the campaign is to raise awareness about the need for affordable rents and mortgages throughout the region. The campaign intends to use an approach that can be scalable and adaptable to each jurisdiction based on their needs. As noted in our April update, and I think Katie mentioned it as well, we did have an opportunity to leverage a partnership opportunity with Home Matters to Arizona to align our efforts and integrate our resources. HMA has contracted with a marketing firm called Javelina, which has been leading the strategic marketing efforts to build the foundation for the campaign and create a messaging framework and a communication toolkit. The marketing strategy that you're about to hear about was based on extensive research and engagement. We've sought input from our member agencies at every step along the way, using that feedback to help shape the strategy. This includes a core support team, communication collaborative, local jurisdiction committee, as well as our regional homelessness public education campaign working group, which consists of your PIOs, communication representatives, and some intergovernmental representatives from your agencies. We have also held a number of listening sessions, as well as a public input session regarding the name of the campaign. So we're here today to just provide an update and seek additional feedback from you. We want to make sure that this campaign is developed in a way that makes it useful to you, and we encourage any questions and feedback. With that, I would like to now introduce Catherine Alonso, who is the CEO for the marketing firm Javelina.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, for having me here today. It's a pleasure. And I'm going to just tell you one little thing about me. My name again is Catherine Alonso, and I'm the CEO of Javelina, but I am also originally from the UK. And I share that just to save you wondering for the next 10 minutes what part of Australia I'm from. I have been here for a minute, and so now I have this weird cocktail accent where I just sound foreign everywhere. So it is such a pleasure to be here and be able to tell you about this work. And I want to start by going through really what the goals are for the overall effort. Next slide. We really have 3 objectives. So the first, and I consider this really our guiding light as we are developing the campaign, is to transform the predominant narrative as it relates to housing and affordable housing. I think we all know that the phrase affordable housing has become associated with a type of housing and really shuts down debate more than it opens debate and creates space for collaboration. And so our goal here is, how are we transforming the predominant narrative so that we are focusing on ensuring that we have housing in our communities that meets need, and also creating a space for consensus building and collaboration that helps us move toward shared goals versus toward division and us versus them, which really is too often the prevailing narrative around these issues right now. The second objective, very much related to the first, is how do we create a network of supporters for this vision? How are we creating, in each and every local community, a real consensus of support and also a coalition of support for this vision where communities have housing that meets everybody's individual need? And ultimately, what we are really seeking to move the needle on is the third objective, making housing a reality for more Arizonans, so that housing insecurity is less prevalent, and also that more, at the end of the day, we are looking for more people to have a place to call home. Next slide. And so let's talk about how we have built the foundation for the campaign. Next slide. This is a summary of what the purpose and the mission are of the campaign effort. We are building a future where every Arizonan has a place to be at home, empowering them to live stable and purposeful lives. To get there, we are inspiring Arizonans to be champions for communities where everyone has a home that meets their needs. We really understand this to be, like I said, kind of the mission and the purpose of the campaign. These are the fundamental building blocks. If the campaign was an organization and you went to their website and it said about us, this would appear on the mission and purpose page. We consider this to be kind of the foundational building block of the story that we have to tell. One of the things that we are working on developing is a full sort of messaging outline, because of course, to tell a story and to build this narrative, it's going to take more than 2 sentences. But this is the foundation of it, that all of the communications that we'll be doing extend from this vision. This is really the driving light behind the campaign. Next slide. This is how we are going to create the vision. We offer key decision makers resources and support so they can overcome obstacles to housing, ensuring that everyone can be at home in the communities they lead. How exactly are we going to do this? It includes shaping and sharing the narrative to create new perspectives, educating on the value and impact of attainable homes, and providing information and data on policies that puts homes within reach for every member of their communities. So this is the substance of what the campaign will involve. And then who is this campaign for? Next slide. In doing so, we serve Arizonans experiencing barriers to find a suitable home in their community. We put a lot of thought into this. Who is the main beneficiary of this effort? And what words are we using to explain who this group of people are? And what we really came down to is that it is this. It is Arizonans experiencing barriers to find a suitable home in their community. And we know that there's a huge continuum there. But this is the simplest, most succinct, most powerful way to describe the group and the commonality that they share. Next slide. So one of the things that we know we will need to do to change the narrative is to have an alternative way to describe affordable housing. We know that phrase in itself creates more barriers than it breaks down right now, and that we need an alternative way to describe this thing that is at the center of our campaign. We also learned pretty quickly that there is no 2-word alternative that is an ideal replacement, and that it doesn't really work that way. You can't just kind of use attainable housing or something similar, because the same limitations of affordable housing will transfer over real quickly. So we developed several alternatives that at the moment we are utilizing in the messaging, and we'll continue to socialize them and see which are going to be the most effective. And I'm excited to share them with you now. The first one is a home that fits our need, or a home that fits your needs. As an example, we believe every Arizonan needs a home that fits their needs. And I really like this one. And as we're developing the materials, I have found it to be an incredibly helpful way to explain the point, because everybody having a home that fits their need is, of course, partially about literally being able to afford where you live, but it's actually about a lot more than that. Is it in the right place that meets your family's needs? Is it the right size? We know there are a lot of people in our communities have a house that is too small or too large for their needs. Do you have access to the amenities that you really need to provide a loving and stable upbringing for your family? So a home that fits your needs is one of the phraseologies that we'll be using. Next slide. Another one is at home in Arizona. And this is a little bit more slogan-esque. As an example, we believe every Arizonan should be at home in Arizona. And this is really making the connection between the physical place that you go to call home and then the community that we consider to be our entire state. Next slide. This is one of my favorites, affordable rents and mortgages. We believe every Arizona needs an affordable rent or mortgage payment. This is kind of quite literally what we mean by affordable housing. And this is a far more relatable statement than affordable housing. Like I said, affordable housing has come to mean a certain type of housing, whereas this concept that you literally need to be able to afford to make your rent or mortgage payment is something that every single person in this room can relate to. And so talking about affordable rents and mortgages really enables us to create consensus rather than division. Next slide. And then the next one, or the last one, is a home within reach. We believe in putting homes within reach of every Arizonan. And this, again, is the idea that having a home, a place to call home, is something that we really want everybody to be able to aspire to and reach. And so these 4 phrases we will be using intermittently, no, not intermittently, interchangeably, that's the right word, interchangeably, and in different ways for different audiences, but with great intention that we're moving away from this idea that we have one phrase to summarize this problem that we're seeking to fix. And when I talk about our ultimate goal is to change narrative. To change narrative, you have to change the words you're using. And this is the beginning. Okay, naming. So naming the campaign, we're sort of in the midst of this campaign, of this process, and I'm excited to share with you where we're at and what we're thinking. So before I share the names that are under consideration, I want to talk a little bit about the process of how we select a name for a campaign. So we start off with the naming analysis. And what we do is we look at adjacent organizations in the same space to look at the types of names that they're using. So what we looked at here was organizations that are in the housing and homelessness space, but we also looked at other campaign efforts, both locally, in the state, and in the country, that are focused on behavior change and change of attitudes, to look at the kinds of names that are effective. The reason that we do this is we want to, oftentimes a name is most effective when it is distinct. And so we don't want to do something that is very similar to other efforts in the same space. And at the same time, we want to learn from what others are doing to see what is being done well and where there might be an opportunity for us to distinguish. So then when we do the naming, from the naming analysis, we're moving to naming development, which looks like our team doing creative development. And I think we originally brainstormed about 62 names. And then we narrow it down using a set of criteria as to what we think is going to be the most effective name. And then we presented 3 final names in several sessions, seeking feedback from MAG members and from other stakeholders. And then the final step, and this is where we are right now, is adopting the new name. And adopting a new name is about certainly taking the feedback. There is also a legal part of the process where we need to make sure that we're not going to run into issues with trademarking or other intellectual property. And that's the bit of the process we're right now. So the 3 names, next slide, that were shared for stakeholder feedback were A Place to Call Home, No Place Like Home, and Home for Good. And these mood boards you see each related were really just to evoke the feelings and the emotions that we were communicating with each name. These mood boards will not be actually used in the campaign itself. And we received really great feedback about all 3 names. We asked, what we sought was information from stakeholders as to their preference. So 1, 2, 3. And then if there were any, we invited comments if there were any particular favorites or concerns. And in legal review, we have found that A Place to Call Home and Home for Good both present trademarking issues. And so at the moment, we are in thorough legal review for No Place Like Home and looking to see if that is available for us to be our name. And we should know that within the next few days. And with No Place Like Home, we're really seeking to evoke, of course, it is associated with a pretty famous movie that you might have seen. And at the same time, it really is evocative of this idea that having a place to call home is something that everybody can relate to and we want for everybody. It is directly tied to this idea. How can we make sure that everybody has a home that meets their need? One of the things we were seeking for in a name is that not only is it descriptive of the campaign, but it is evocative. It makes you feel, and it makes this connection between a home and everything that a home signifies for a person and their family. And we feel like No Place Like Home is the ideal name to do that. Next slide. Okay, so we are nearing the end of the brand development. Once we have a chosen name, we'll develop a logo and the visual identity, and we'll be holding a public engagement or a public feedback session for that part of the process as well. And then as the brand is completed and we understand the brand to live in the name, the visual identity, and the words that we're using, then the next question is, what are the marketing strategies and tactics we're using to communicate this brand to our target audiences? And this right now is our marketing plan. So first of all, who do we want to reach? And we have identified 4 unique audiences. One is elected officials and people who are leading their communities. So these are not only elected, but also appointed leaders within their communities. Developers, people who are actually identifying and meeting the housing need in our community. Likely voters, people who are very engaged and are paying attention in their local communities. And then HOAs and similar groups who are really on the front lines of these issues. And these are our initial target audiences. We have identified that these are the people we need to move the needle with in terms of building a new narrative around housing that meets everybody's needs. Next slide. And so how are we going to reach our target audiences? The first strategy is that we are going to seek to foster collaboration with stakeholders. One of the very first priorities that the Home Matters and MAG teams communicated to us is that they are not looking to reinvent the wheel. They want to work with existing efforts and build into what is already being done. And we know that the various stakeholders in this space are going to be our fantastic champions and partners to help share this message. So what does that look like tactically? Tactically, the idea is that we will develop and share a toolkit of communication materials that would include sample social media posts, sample ads, sample emails, sample website content that our stakeholders can share with their audiences. And so what we're really looking to create is an intentional echo chamber where we're creating and sharing this new language because we know our stakeholders are going to help us reach those target audiences. And so we'll be seeking to develop the toolkit, build levels of engagement where different organizations can engage at a level that meets their capacity and ability. And so together we can really seek to form a presence in conferences, at events, and also in other ways throughout the community. Next slide. The second strategy, and this is incredibly intentional, is that we know we need to tell real human stories. And one of the things that we've put a great deal of thought into this strategy, and I would say that one of the things that will really set this campaign apart is we have thought a lot about the type of stories that we want to tell. And remember that what we're really seeking to do is change the narrative away from one of division and focusing on everything that isn't working and really telling the story of how when we imagine communities that meet everybody's needs, we can do things differently. And so what we're going to be seeking to do is not only tell real human stories, but tell the stories of how reimagining how communities can look to meet everybody's need and making sure the housing needs are met can work and does look different and does look successful. And those are the stories that we are going to be looking to tell. And so we know that a lot goes into powerful storytelling. We'll need to be able to identify the stories and communicate them with words, but also with imagery and videos. And so we'll be looking to create a process to identify those stories and tell them consistently. And strategies 1 and 2 really link into each other because we know that we'll be dependent on our stakeholders to ensure that we can get that message out. Next slide. And then the third strategy is really expanding campaign messages and presence and making sure that we're building awareness of the campaign. And so we'll be looking to do this by launching a website, having a digital advertising presence, and then having an earned media presence. And so we're really creating that brand for the campaign and building recognition for the, hopefully, No Place Like Home campaign. Next slide. I'm happy to take any comments or questions.
Okay. Catherine, really appreciate it. Thank you. Kelly, members of the audience, is there any questions or comments?
I did have.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation. I was reflecting as you were going through it that there is a group that's come together called Home Arizona. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but it's a group that's come together with, I think, Elliott Pollock and some of the private developers. Feels like similar mission, similar messaging. Unsure if there's an opportunity to partner with them or if this is a competing effort or just how those might coalesce or work in concert with one another.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you very much for that question. Collaboration has been incredibly important. We simply don't have enough time or resources to duplicate efforts. So the effort that you're referencing is through Greater Phoenix Leadership, and they've been convening the stakeholders. They are looking at this more from a developer perspective, and we're looking at this more from a campaign perspective in this iteration. We're also working with other partners like the Arizona Community Foundation. So I wouldn't say that they're duplicative efforts. They are complementary, and we're being very strategic in the way that we coordinate with them and with other stakeholders as well.
Good question. Thank you, Julie. Any other questions or comments? Yeah, Mr. Brady.
First of all, I think you hit it right on the head by not using the word affordable housing. It's a term that gets used very broadly, and it emotes a lot of emotions that are not always positive. And so I think it is important to talk about the band of housing and what works for individuals at different levels of income and situations. So I think that's really key. And frankly, if I'm leading off how you're discussing this, I wouldn't even use affordable housing in that conversation. I think you start off with, we're trying to figure out how to provide housing for everyone. And whether it's workforce housing, whatever it might be, Andrew pointed out to me, even having high-end housing is important because then it allows individuals to go into that housing. They're not pushing the people down out of the other housing that's available. So here's what I'm trying to understand is, we talked, we're stakeholders who are responsible. How are we pushing, who will be taking this message out? Because part of the challenge we have as a region, that there are certain communities that have certainly a disproportionate amount of housing for all versus there may be narrow bands of housing in other communities. Is the intention to message this across the region equally? So the idea that regardless of where you live, the message is that housing should be available for all levels of income and situation, regardless of the part of the region you're in? Or is this intended just to keep growing more of what we have that's currently allocated? I'm just curious how we're going to message that out.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thank you for that question. And I'm glad to answer it, but then please add in if you have anything to add. So I think the way that we'll approach this is in phases. And the way I think about it is certainly initially it'll be stakeholder driven. And the initial phase will be focused on what I would think of as our low-hanging fruit in terms of people who are already engaged and very aware of the issue and familiar and also hungry for these kinds of materials so that they can infuse them within their communications. And then the second phase, once that is complete, will then be seeking to really go a layer out and bring people in who maybe have not thought about these issues. And I think through that approach, to answer your question directly, is we will be addressing all sort of layers or levels of the issue. Does that answer your question?
I think so. And it's a hard question. I probably wasn't very articulate. I guess my point is this should be a campaign for the whole region, regardless of where you live.
Yes.
That the messaging is for all parts of all communities.
That's absolutely
and I think that's important, right? It's not intended to be, hey, this is great for Phoenix, and the rest of us will watch them address, this spectrum of housing, and the rest of us will enjoy moderate to high housing choices only. I think if we're going to be a region, and I would prefer that the message has to be a regional message, not that, oh, we'll let this community decide to use it or not. I think it has to be a campaign across the entire region that we look at it equitably that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Well said. Any other questions or comments? Really looking forward to, as you continue this. It's wonderful to see how you are framing the narrative, I think, in a very appropriate way that is inclusive for all while addressing the issues. Is there another additional comment? Yes, Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I just wanted to give you a heads up. The next opportunity for your input is a public input session that's currently scheduled for November 17th at 9:30 a.m. We would love for you and your staff to join us for that public input session. The only thing that might change it is if we have any hiccups with the legal naming process, but right now that's the scheduled date for that session. We would love to participate.
Thank you. And where is that located on the 17th? It'll be a Zoom meeting?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. All right, we'll move to agenda item number 8, which is Resiliency, Open Space, Sustainability and Environment Work Group, or ROSE. This will be presented by MAG Environmental Director Tim Frankquist. Thank you, Tim.
Chairman, members of the committee, thank you. And I think I found the longest name for a committee in the agency, so we get an award there. But thank you for the opportunity to present today on this work group. As you can see from the title there, it's a pretty large net that we're thinking about throwing for this work group, and I'll get into a little bit of details there in a second. Next slide, please. But in terms of kind of how we got here, I joined MAG in February of last year, and I think it's pretty safe to say that both Nathan and I have had a pretty steady stream of conversations with member agencies and some externals on these topics here. I think they center around action, trying to push MAG into this space. What are we doing? And I think in some internal discussions, what we recognize is there is a potential gap here. But before I get into the gap, let me kind of start with current state. Next slide, please. So in just terms of a quick refresher, at MAG, we have 3 environmental technical committees. We have the Air Quality Technical Committee, that's very specific to Clean Air Act. All 3 of these come out of a governor's delegation, formal delegation. So they have very strict mandates around these congressional acts. We got the Water Quality Advisory. Again, this is a Clean Water Act committee. And then again, we have the Solid Waste Committee. Again, this is out of RCRA. So these are 3 federal programs with very specific mandates, none of which actually kind of cover the areas that we're going to discuss. Obviously, they overlap. But no single one of these technical committees, I think, are best suited to take on these topics. Next slide, please. So again, in terms of current state opportunities, Inflation Reduction Act, of course, has been in the news. Lots of wonderful opportunities there for municipalities. These are just 4 that I put up there, but there's a pretty long list specific to our region. Then on the other side, I think there's opportunities in terms of information sharing and planning. So we have these opportunities at both information and actually programmatic acts that are kind of just sitting out there into the day with no real way for us to kind of grab on and engage on a regional level. Next slide, please. So in terms of kind of a problem statement, so where are we at today? So I think the problem statement probably looks a lot like we don't have a formal regional forum for having discussions of sustainability issues, actions, and potential issues. And so what the work group is intended to do is, 1, answer kind of the first question. Is this a problem? This is a big problem. This is a medium-sized problem. Does it essentially require action? If the answer to that is yes, then essentially what the work group would be doing is looking to recommend a potential committee, and it would be the ROSE committee. And what they would take on at that point is making a recommendation, would have the composition of the committee, what the structure is, what the mission is, what the purpose is. And we would develop through MAG membership, and specifically driven by MAG membership, what would the composition structure of that committee look like, and ultimately make a recommendation. Again, I think it's important. We've heard from several member agencies, but not all of them. So I think this gives us an opportunity to talk through that as an agency. Is this something that we need in the area? Certainly a topic that's out there and it's big and it's being discussed a lot. So this will just give us an opportunity as a work group to kind of go through this. We're looking to probably stand that up sometime next month, at least for a quick kickoff, but certainly jump into that in earnest in January of next year. Next slide, please. And then just next slide, please. So just in terms of what else is out there, we're certainly not blazing new ground. Many MPOs and COGs have already kind of taken different pathways down this realm. So a lot of great paths already out there for us, a lot of lessons learned, a lot of opportunities. At the same time, being in the Southwest, in the desert, we're in a unique environment. So this gives us plenty of opportunities to innovate, use those ideas, even create some of our own. So a lot of good information already out there that we can leverage. Certainly a lot of great opportunity that we can innovate and integrate into our area should the committee get stood up. Next slide, please. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you. Real quick, just this is for information only. And are there any questions or comments for Tim? Yes,
Yeah,
please,
just
Ms.
a
Miller.
quick comment. So at Valley Metro, we have and have had for a few years now a sustainability plan, but we're working to intensify our efforts in sustainability planning. We've just kicked off a fleet transition plan. So I would love the opportunity for our staff to participate in such a committee. And I certainly think the regional scale is appropriate for tackling complex issues like sustainability and climate change. So very supportive. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Mr. Brady.
This is great. I think this is a good idea. I think, among us, there are some cities that are, way out ahead. I know Tempe, I think, and Phoenix already have their, I don't know, action plans or what are the references. I know we've adopted one. And I think it would be helpful. It's tried hard as a city by itself to try to, manage all the elements related to climate action, whether it's air or water. So I love the idea that we can bring what we have and bring them all and kind of put them under this umbrella together. So I think a lot of work has been, plowed. I mean, but I do love the idea that it's kind of a collaborative, bringing all those best ideas and aspirations and bringing them on a regional level. So I hope that maybe that's where we get to, is maybe having something like that for the whole region we can all kind of buy into if you take the best of what we're trying to accomplish as community. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Just quickly, Tim. So the general sense is it will first be more at the technical level to kind of identify if or what specific problems are there. And then that next step is then let's look at that solution. And then certainly best practices would be one piece. Any kind of sense of what the Rose Committee will ultimately look like in composite? Would it be this level? Will it be a technical work group? Any quick sense or prediction?
Chairman, members of the committee, I think that's a great question. I've been a little bit careful putting too much muscle on the bone, really, because I did want it to be a member driven. I'll certainly offer up my opinions, but I think what I would put, the way I think I would answer that question is in the way of opportunities. I think if something like this would get stood up, you do have kind of the more short-term opportunities and funding and grants. So there'll probably be a wing there. Just what was spoken about, maybe a regional sustainability plan, regional climate action plan. Those are all opportunities. So I think as the work group kind of gets set up, vets those things out, I think that's where we'll find out, is this more of a technical issue? Where does this kind of get teased out? But again, I think really just because there's so many different opportunities, all interrelated but slightly tweaked, I think that's what the work group will ultimately
Makes sense. So kind of get an inventory of all the different sustainability plans that many jurisdictions have, obviously take advantage of the existing grant opportunities and then see what momentum it gets. Got it. Thank you very much. Yes, Ms. Karen.
Thank you. I guess it's, more of a concern, and maybe it's for Eric, about just the organizational capacity to take on new issues. I mean, we just heard a lot of conversation about homelessness, which is a relatively new area for this committee. And, knowing it's a transportation focused organization, I guess just organizational capacity. I mean, I think that we are all aware that some of the topics you've mentioned have some political taints to it, which could really become complicated. And so I guess I just want to make sure we're going into this eyes open, understanding it's expanding the role of this organization into some areas and arenas that we don't currently participate in. So,
Mr. Chair, members of the management committee, a great point. I have that same concern too, and that's why we're moving fairly cautiously, slowly on this, setting up a work group, so we don't get too far out in front of ourselves, quite frankly, and our member agencies. So, but there is a lot of activity, especially at the federal level, a lot of grant opportunities and other programs. There's also increasing requirements in the transportation legislation, federal transportation legislation, that requires certain things to happen now that kind of overlap into the same area. And so for better or for worse, we have to be able to have a way that these kind of issues can be discussed from a regional perspective. And so there's a lot happening in the space. And so who knows what might happen in the future. The world is getting more complicated, to say the least. So, but once again, I share that concern. We're moving cautiously in this because we don't want to necessarily take on more than we can accomplish as an agency. So thank you for that.
Any other questions? Great. Eric, Tim, thank you very much. Appreciate this. Look forward to the conversations. And next is item number 9, the 2022 annual report on the status of the implementation of Proposition 400. And here to present is MAG Transportation Analyst 3 Steph Stearns. Thank you, Ms. Stearns.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Tyne, members of the Management Committee. I'm pleased to present this item to you for action today. Next slide, please. The Proposition 400 annual report is required by state statute. It looks at each of the modal lifecycle programs contained in the program, and it addresses the project status, financing, and the outlook for implementation. Next slide, please. Getting right into our revenues, starting with the half-cent sales tax. For the remainder of the program, the half-cent sales tax is projected to bring in approximately $2.5 billion. This is nearly 17% higher than the 2021 report, and this is due to strong growth in the retail sector. Next slide, please. Moving on to our federal funds, we are forecasted to bring in about $1.1 billion for the remainder of the program. This is 13% higher than the 2021 report. This includes the recently enacted IIJA. And then I do want to point out this lighter blue on the pie chart here, FTA discretionary funds. The region has been very successful thanks to our partners at Valley Metro in getting competitive discretionary grant funding awarded nationwide for projects. So that's been really key and is a very large chunk of the federal revenues we are expecting. Next slide, please. Getting right into the Freeway Lifecycle Program, a total of 3 projects were completed over this past fiscal year. I will note that this report does capture a moment in time. So as of July 1st, 2022, this is what the status is reporting. 3 projects were completed in the Freeway Lifecycle Program, 7 underway. As an example, you have SR 24 here shown as underway, whereas today it is complete, but as of July 21st, it was under construction. So that is why it is shown that way. Next slide, please. Moving on to the Arterial Lifecycle Program, many more Arterial Lifecycle Program projects were underway than what is shown on the screen. This is just a few highlights. This top photo is the Northern Parkway, Dysart Road, and El Mirage Road overpasses. Bottom photo here is the intersection of Southern and Stapley, a Mesa ALCP project. Next slide, please. Moving on to the Transit Lifecycle Program, it is split in between bus and rail. On the bus side, this past year, we saw a new route implemented. That was the Route 515, the Fountain Hills Mesa Connector. 135 vehicles were programmed for purchase. This includes expansion and replacement fleet vehicles and everything from a standard 40-foot bus down to a paratransit vehicle. On the rail side, we saw the completion of the Tempe streetcar. The South Central Extension and Northwest Extension Phase 2 were actively under construction, and we had the Capital Extension in planning. Next slide, please. So turning focus to what Prop 400 has accomplished as a whole. We have seen 410 quarter miles of freeway and highway projects, 252 quarter miles of arterial projects, and 7.6 million bus transit revenue miles in 22 alone. So expand that many times over for the life of the program. Next slide, please. Looking forward, MAG will continue to review the program cost and estimates. We will adjust projects and programs as needed. And we are feverishly working forward to identify a path to the ballot and next steps for the extension of Prop 400. Next slide, please. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, that concludes my presentation. The report is on the website for your review. We do have a couple hard copies available as well. So please let me know if you would like a copy and let me know if you have.
Thank you, Steph. I appreciate it. Members, do you have any questions or comments? Yes, Mr. Brady.
Just quickly. So this is a report that's required. Was this required? This report is required each year for us to do, or is this?
Yeah,
just
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Brady, members of management, this is a statutory required report. I actually wrote the first one back in the early 90s.
Oh, wow. Look at those.
By hand, yeah, exactly. Had a hammer chisel. So anyway, and I wanted to congratulate Steph on her work on this. This is just amazing. I should have brought my first one.
Yeah.
You could have compared the two. They're night and day difference, to say the least. So anyway.
I just think with everything that's going on, it's one of those reports that we should try to widely distribute it, I guess is my point.
Yeah.
As opposed to just putting it on a shelf, we want to, so give it, whatever the links or whatever, it'd be nice for us to share that with our community and get that out there. Just who knows?
Very good
Someday
point.
we might want to do this again.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, great suggestion. Last slide had some wonderful accomplishments. Any other questions or comments? Great. This was just for information and discussion. So thank you very much and congratulations on the report. And we'll move next to legislative updates. So MAG Policy and Government Relations Director Nathan Pryor will present on a.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Management Committee. Please refrain from hitting refresh on your favorite news outlet. A lot of this was compiled earlier this morning. Of course, I'm talking about the election and ongoing results. So of course, many races are still undecided. We'll continue tracking for the coming days. Also recognizing that later today around 8 p.m., anticipating another release from Maricopa County. So ongoing, obviously. But as of 6 a.m. this morning, we're seeing about 91% precinct reporting remain to be counted, about 900,000 statewide, about 400,000 or so within Maricopa County. Also within Maricopa County, seeing some 17,000 ballots unreadable. So more work needs to be put into reading those ballots. On the congressional side, again, preliminary results. We were seeing Senator Kelly lead over Masters. In the House, we were seeing Republican wins with Biggs, Lesko, and Gosar. Democrat wins, Gallegos, Stanton, and Grijalva. 3 races too close to call. So again, ongoing. But we're looking forward to working with the new Congress when they take their seats in 2023. We're currently refreshing our portfolio of MAG issue papers for our upcoming congressional meetings that are planned. We can share those issue papers with member agencies when complete. So hopefully that's helpful with your fly-ins with congressional offices in DC and here locally. Turning to the Arizona legislature, again, preliminary results in the House. This morning was seeing 29-29, Republican to Democrat with 2 seats too close to call. Arizona Senate preliminary results of 14 Rs and 13 Ds with three seats undecided. As in years past, though, we intend to reach out to key legislators, leadership, and staff to educate on the work that MAG does broadly as an agency, but also, of course, highlighting our key issues. Similarly, we'll be doing this work with the incoming governor's office, with staff. Clearly, Proposition 400 extension is top of mind. We're continuing conversations with current executive and leadership, legislative leadership, and we'll update member agencies on developments. We'll work to continue sharing the importance of transportation investment in our region with incoming leadership and offices, emphasizing economic opportunities, air quality impacts, and mobility, similar to those reports that we've been giving in the past number of months. So, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, obviously a lot going on in terms of the vote counts. We'll continue to monitor and provide updates as needed.
Mr. Pryor, thank you very much. With that, we'll move to agenda item 11, requests for future agenda items. Are there any requests by a management committee member for an item on the future agenda? Seeing none, we'll move to agenda item 12, comments from the committee. Any comments or announcements from the membership? Silence. So at that point, the next meeting for the management committee will be on Wednesday, January 11th at 12 p.m. And with no further business, today's meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Yeah.